Well, I want to thank all of you who have risked the good challenge of having your kids stay with you during the sermon. And I just want you to know, I want you kids to know that I am so glad that you're a part of this. And I think that God can teach you through this. I really do believe. I think it's a special thing that you get to sit in the worship service with your parents and see your parents worshiping Jesus. So I'm really glad that you're here. And I would encourage you guys to draw pictures. If you can't write your own notes, draw pictures or something that this sermon makes you think about. Okay, so pay attention to the words and draw me a picture. Come show it to me afterwards. I'd like to see what you guys think as we talk about a couple of things today. The first thing, or maybe I should say the main thing that we want to talk about this morning is this claim that Jesus makes in John chapter 8, verse 12, that he is the light of the world. That's where we're going to spend most of our time this morning. But before we get there, we are going to talk about a second thing, namely, why I'm not going to be teaching through John chapter 7, verse 53 to John chapter 8, verse 11. I'm not going to be preaching through that section. And the bottom line of why I'm not going to be preaching through that section is that I, more importantly, most scholars believe, this is virtually unanimous both within and outside of evangelical scholarship, most scholars believe that these verses are not originally a part of John's gospel. Your Bibles note that. I'll show you where in a few minutes. And in order to do that, I want to start off by just sharing with you a little bit about the background behind how we get our English translations of the Bible. The translation of the Bible that you're holding in your hand is not the result of a 2,000-year-old game of telephone. You know how a telephone works, right? Who in here knows how to play telephone? Okay. The first person, say you've got 4 people, and the first person whispers into the second person's ear, and they say, Mickey Mouse, some phrase, Mickey Mouse. And the second person hears Mickey Mouse, and then they pass it on, and they say Mickey Mouse. And the second person hears, like, itchy scalp. And so then they, or maybe that's the third, I forget where we are in the chain here. Third person passes it on and says, itchy scalp. And that person hears twist and shout. And then by the time you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th person, it's like Mickey Mouse has turned into green eggs and ham. It's totally different. That is not a good picture of how we got our English translations of the Bible. And I'm specifically going to be talking about the New Testament today. I'm going to be talking about how we get the New Testament. I want you to know it's not as though we had some Greek manuscripts in which the scriptures were written, and then the Greek got translated into Latin. And then somebody took that Latin translation and translated it into, German. And then we took that German translation and we translated it into English, and we got green eggs and ham. That's not how it works. And people will sometimes say, or it's a misunderstanding. It's often a straw man fallacy where people will say the Bible's not reliable because it's like a 2,000-year-old game of telephone. It just makes it easier to reject the validity of the Bible if you frame it that way. If that's how it were really done, it would be a terrible way to think of. It would be totally open to criticism, high levels of criticism. Because you're gonna lose so much in translation. And so I don't want you to think that that's how it happens. It's an uninformed misconception. Modern translations of the New Testament are translated from ancient Greek manuscripts that we have found. We have them. We've taken digital photos of them. They are archived. We can go back and look at them. We're not going Greek, Latin, German, English. We're going straight back to the Greek. We have a lot of these manuscripts. We have over 5,000 manuscripts, which is like an incredible amount of historical data. There's no other historical document from antiquity that even comes close to having as much manuscript evidence as we have for the New Testament. Old Testament's a little bit of a different deal, still very solid. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls was huge in affirming that what we have is has maintained what was happening in the 1st century BC around the time of Christ. I'm not talking about Hebrew today. We're just talking about the Greek. We've got all these manuscripts. They date back all the way to the 2nd century. This is a fragment from a manuscript called P66, papyrus number 66. It's dated to about the end of the 2nd century, beginning of the 3rd century. We have some manuscripts. We actually just discovered some manuscripts in a papier-mâché mask for a mummy. And some genius out there figured out how to dissolve the glue in this mask and maintain the papyrus that it was made out of, and maintain the ink on it. And we found a fragment of of a copy of Mark's Gospel that we think is probably dated to the 1st century, about the year 80. It'd be the oldest fragment we've ever found. That's like written what was 80 years ago? World War II? Okay. Great Depression, I think that was maybe longer. So, I mean, that's a short period of time, historically speaking. So we've got these amazing manuscripts, and I just want you to know that this ESV translation or the NIV translation, if you're using some sort of modern translation out there, it's not a translation of a translation. It is a translation directly translated from original language manuscripts preserved for us that we've discovered, that we can just go to and look at and read. Now, let's say you got all those manuscripts and you lay them out side by side. And you're looking at all those manuscripts. You take this one, you look at this one. 93% of the words in this manuscript and in this manuscript are not in question. 93%. Over 9 out of every 10 words. There's no question. They're consistent from manuscript to manuscript. In 7% of the words, 7 out of every 100 words, there are what scholars refer to as variants, meaning that this manuscript says something different from this manuscript. Now, often those differences are totally negligible, like misspellings of words, or what they call transposition, where you've got maybe a couple letters flipped around within a word, or maybe this manuscript uses a singular form of a noun, or this manuscript uses the plural form. They're basically negligible, and in almost every instance of a variant, there are fairly clear explanations for why the variant exists, and therefore the textual critics, that's the name of the type of scholar who does this kind of work. This discipline is called textual criticism. Textual critics are able to determine with great accuracy which variant is the original and which variant is the mistake. And they can do that because there's a very sophisticated process where you can weigh these types of things. It's kind of somewhat of an art, somewhat of a science. There are things like families of manuscripts. So this guy has, some old scribe way back when has this manuscript, and he's making a copy of it, and so he's writing this down, and then he's got a copy of it. And then somebody makes a copy of that, and then somebody makes a copy of it, and you get a family of manuscripts that forms. Well, we know that certain families were copied pretty sloppily. They tend to have a lot of errors. There are other families of manuscripts that are just pristine. And we know that in this family, they're very careful at copying what came from before. So you get 2 manuscripts, one from a good family, one from a bad family, and they're different, will tend to favor the better manuscript. There are some principles that they use to try to determine. Usually older manuscripts are more reliable manuscripts. We know the types of errors that scribes would make when they would copy. For example, if you're copying, from this paper to this paper, and you're looking over here, and you write down this word, and then you write down this word, and you get to the end of the line, and you write down this word, and then you come over here, and you write down the same word again. That's a typical type of mistake that a scribe would make. They would double up a word, or they would flip words around, or they would try to smooth out things that didn't seem to make sense. There's all these things that we know are typical, and because of that, you can go through this process, and there are very, very few instances in which we're just simply not sure what the original said. And when that happens, our English translators have done a very good job of letting us know by giving us footnotes. So if there's something that's in question, we're just not sure what word was actually used here or what order these words came in, the footnotes will say something about it, and maybe the pastor should just be careful not to build his whole sermon on a word that we're not really even sure if it was there. Okay, no big deal, so don't build your sermon on that word. So what we've been able to do is use this massive amount of ancient manuscript evidence to very carefully investigate and discover with great accuracy what the original authors actually wrote because of all this manuscript evidence that we have. Here's the point. At the end of the day, when scholars translate an English version of the New Testament from ancient Greek manuscripts, they are doing it from manuscripts with which we have a high degree of confidence that the Greek we're using has faithfully preserved what was originally written by the human author. And that means we have a very reliable Bible. Okay, that's the point. I want you to know we have a very reliable Bible. There are good processes by which we can determine what the original Greek said. There are good scholars that help us make sure we know how to do that. There are people who are trained who can just look at the actual manuscripts for ourselves so that we can see if somebody's trying to pull the wool over our eyes on this, some of us have been trained. We can just go to the original manuscripts and just look at them for ourselves. We have a very reliable Bible. And I want you to know that, and the reason I'm giving you all that information is because I just want you to know that this has been very carefully thought through. And I want you to know that because we're going to read a passage right now that's not supposed to be here. And then I'll explain to you why every modern-day Bible translation committee has come to the same conclusion. And then I'll show you how they've marked it in this text. Look at John chapter 7, verse 53. You may notice in your Bible that there are brackets, or double brackets, or a footnote. If it's not here, it'll be at the end of verse 11 of chapter 8. They went each to his own house. Okay, so the context before this, Jesus is at the Feast of Booths. It's the last day of the Feast of Booths. And then, verse 53, they went each to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground, but when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." In the ESV, this section has double brackets. And what that means, there's 2 brackets on the beginning, 2 brackets at the end of that section. What that means is that the translation committee does not believe that this was originally in John's gospel. You may have a single bracket. We've got a little note in the ESV before chapter 8 starts that says the earliest manuscripts do not include 753 to 811. This only happens in a few places in the New Testament, or in the modern English translations. It happens again at the end of the book of Mark. These verses are present, this little section is present in ancient manuscripts that we have, lots of them, after the year 900 AD. This passage does not exist in any ancient manuscript that we have prior to the 5th century. It's just not there. You can look at all of them. It's just not in any manuscript that we have of the Gospel of John. When it does start to show up in ancient manuscripts that we have, it shows up after verse 36. Okay? In other words, in a different spot. Chapter 7, it shows up at the end of John 21. We've got some manuscripts in which it shows up in the middle of Luke, not even in the same book, this whole section in Luke 21. So when it does show up, this story is just kind of placed in a lot of different places, which indicates it's probably just not original to John's gospel. On top of that, this passage is missing from all the commentaries written on the book of John by early church fathers up to the year 398. It's just not there. So you've got these ancient church fathers. They've got a copy of the Gospel of John. They're writing commentary on it, and they don't write anything on this passage. Why not? It's not there in the copy of the Gospel of John that they're using. And so the conclusion, as the evidence indicates, and like I said, the ESV, the NIV, the NASB, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, any modern translation, excluding the King James Version and the New King James Version, and there's a reason for that, any modern translation, every modern translation committee says we don't think that this should be in here. Now the question is, why'd you put it in then? Right? Like, please do us pastors a favor and don't do that, because then we have to take a whole morning to talk about this kind of stuff, and it makes people feel like, oh, can I trust my Bible? And just take it out, put it in a footnote. Here's the reason why they did it. When the King James Version, when the King James Version was translated, 1611 is when it was published. The Greek manuscripts that they used weren't real good in many ways. There was a lot of corruption in them. There are many things that are said in the manuscripts that were used to translate the King James Version that are not said anywhere else in any other manuscript that we own. It's like, why did we? Okay. What happened is we've just found better manuscripts since then. We've found older manuscripts. But what had already started to take place in the English Bible tradition is we had learned this beautiful story about what Jesus did for this woman. And so it became very beloved in our tradition. In our culture, in our English culture. And so modern Bible translators are kind of afraid to pull it out for the sake of tradition. I think that we should just bite the bullet and go ahead and do it. And a lot of people agree with that. But that's just my opinion. I think it's a good one. Now that doesn't mean that this didn't happen. Almost all scholars believe this actually was a real event. It was preserved. It was probably preserved in oral tradition or written down. And then at some point, it made its way into later textual manuscripts. Probably wasn't even intentional, because a lot of the manuscripts that we have that include this section have got some sort of indicator that, something written in the margin or an asterisk or something that indicates that we know that the scribe knew that this was some sort of importation. So I'm not going to preach on this section because I don't believe it's the Word of God. This little section. I don't believe it's the Scripture. And I'm standing together with every modern Bible translation team when I say that. I just don't get to just use little brackets and dodge the issue like they do. So there you go. It's a later edition. And what that means is that the scene that we're looking at today continues to be the last day of the Feast of Booths. In chapter 7, verse 37, it says that on the last day of the Feast of Booths, the great day of the feast, Jesus stands up and he declares to everybody at the feast that whoever is thirsty, come to me, come to me, drink, rivers of living water will flow from within. And when John wrote this gospel, he did not intend for there to be a gap between the end of chapter 7 and chapter 8, verse 12. That wasn't there when John wrote it. And John's story of the events of the Feast of Booths is not to be interrupted with a story about this beloved story about Jesus giving grace to this adulterous woman. It's just not supposed to be there. The scene in which Jesus offers living waters on the last day of the Feast of Booths is supposed to be followed up with this second profound statement that Jesus makes at the same feast on the same day, and we read it in chapter 8, verse 12. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The intended flow in John's mind when he writes the gospel is last day of Feast of Booths. Come to me, rivers of living water. The crowds are divided. Jesus has something else to say. He's the light of the world too. So that's how it flows. And with that recreated scene, now let's look at John chapter 8, verse 12. Dive into a little bit where Jesus here says, I am the light of the world. It's the second very clear I am statement that Jesus has made in the Gospel of John. The first one was in chapter 6, verse 35, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life, meaning I am the ultimate spiritual nourishment that you are intended to have for your own health, for your own growth, so that you can thrive. I give to you, I am the bread of life. I give life to you spiritually. And here, I am the light. I am the light of the world. What does that mean? What does it mean that he is the light of the world? Well, since it's still the last day of the Feast of Booths, it's important to think a little bit about the role that light played in the Feast of Booths. We talked about a couple weeks ago, there was this water ceremony. You guys remember this? A water pouring ceremony on the last day of the Feast of Booths. And that gave us some really rich background for understanding what Jesus means when he talks about living waters welling up from within us, rivers of living waters. Well, there was also on the last day of the Feast of Booths, the same day that Jesus is saying these things, there was also a lighting ceremony on that last day. There were these four huge lamps that were lit in one of the temples in Jerusalem, and then all the men would carry torches around. And then let me just read to you what happened. This is from the Mishnah Sukkah number 5, which is an ancient Jewish source here. Here's what they did. There was not a court in Jerusalem that was not illuminated by the lights of the water drawing. Okay, so they really closely associated the water ceremony and this light ceremony. They were kind of viewed as almost one and the same event. There was this water portion to it. There was this light portion to it. And then pious and distinguished men danced before the people with lighted flambeaux in their hands, whatever that is, and sang hymns and lauds before them. And the Levites accompanied them with harps, psalteries, cymbals, and numberless musical instruments. So the people are dancing. They're dancing throughout the night. There's this Levitical orchestra that's playing along. There's trumpets, there's cymbals, there's dancing, there's singing. And it was said that the temple shed a light over all of Jerusalem at this lighting ceremony. And in this context, Jesus boldly proclaims, I am the light of the world. All of this points to me. I'm what you're anticipating. When you expected God's kingdom to arrive and all the light imagery that goes with that, it was pointing to me. I'm the fulfillment of this feast. So it's the second time that he said it. I'm the true water, right? Or I give the true water, and I'm the true light. What does that mean? What does it mean that Jesus is the light of the... What's the imagery of light referring to. I'm going to look at this from I'm going to go to two different places to try to get a feel for what does the Bible mean by light, or more, here's my real question. What does Jesus mean by light right here? So I'm going to go to two places. One, I want to look at what the Old Testament has to say about light, and then two, I want to look at what the Gospel of John has to say about light, because the Gospel of John has a lot of things to say about light. So, Old Testament, the notion of light is kind of everywhere in the Old Testament. For example, in the Exodus event, God's light emanated from this glory cloud that was leading Israel throughout the wilderness for 40 years after they had been rescued from slavery in Egypt. The light of God's glory cloud, this notion of guidance through the wilderness. Or the Israelites would sing in their Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Light has this saving ability of some sort. Or the scripture is said to be a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Psalm 119, 105. The Messiah, God's long-awaited royal Redeemer, King, Savior, was promised to be a light to the nations in Isaiah 49, 6. And then one of the most beautiful promises, we've already read it once this morning from Isaiah chapter 60. Here's what's going to happen when God brings His glorious eternal kingdom. The sun shall be no more your light by day, nor for brightness shall the moon give you light, but the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Your sun shall no more go down, nor your moon withdraw itself, for the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your days of mourning shall be ended. You see, light brings an end to suffering. There's this salvation, this rescue concept that tends to go along with light. Your people shall all be righteous. Okay? It has this transforming effect when the light comes. They shall possess the land forever, the branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I might be glorified. God Himself, the everlasting light of His people, bringing rescue and bringing transformation for the sake of His glory as He shines His light on His people. We could go on, but it sets the stage pretty well for getting to where we're headed in the New Testament. For the Jews, the Scriptures had taught them that the notion of light indicated guidance, rescue, some sort of divine clarity of reality, spiritual vision, true knowledge for the sake of Israelites and for the sake of all of the nations. That's some Jewish Old Testament background. What about John? What about John's Gospel? What role does light play in John's Gospel? In John's Gospel, light contrasts with and confronts darkness. That's one thing we could say. There's kind of light, darkness, this dualism kind of idea. John chapter 1, verse 4. In Him was life, in Jesus was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You've got this light, darkness. John chapter 12, verse 46. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. Darkness, bad. Light, good. You don't want to remain in darkness. Light is the good thing, darkness is the bad thing, but what's it referring to? Right? Because this is metaphorical language. This is imagery. What is light? What is darkness? In John's Gospel, darkness represents a state in which there is a hiding of wickedness, a hiding of sin, a hiding of things that are false. And light represents something that provides exposure or clarity. Let me read to you from John 3, verse 19. The light has come into the world, and because people loved darkness rather than the light, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. Okay, so people have evil works, and therefore they love darkness. Why? What's the connection? Why do you love darkness? Because your works are... What does your works being evil have to do with darkness? Well, darkness covers the works of evil. Listen to Jesus. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his work should be exposed. I don't want my works I don't want my wickedness to be exposed. So I'm taking cover under darkness, which hides the reality of the situation. Light comes and exposes, and I'm scattering for the shadows because I don't want my evil deeds to be exposed. A state of darkness is a spiritual state in which there is a cover-up. So evil can go undetected. Darkness provides this unawareness of what's really going on. It's a state of blindness to reality so that you can't see what's around you and you can't see even what's within you. One time, Amy and I took our girls to a museum in New Jersey, a children's museum. I should have asked you about this. Can I tell this story? Yeah. Okay. And they had this exhibit that was a maze. And it was a maze in pitch black. And you crawl through it. You have to just kind of feel and you make your way around. It wasn't real big, but it was like they had done a really good job of like not letting any light in this thing at all. So I think Lucia and I went through it, and we kind of make our way through it. Oh, that was neat. And Amy and Chloe decided to go through it, and so this was really cool. You could stand outside, and there was a video screen, and you could watch the people inside. You could see them, but they couldn't see anything, right? And so they're crawling in. They kind of start off. Chloe's going first, and they go around a couple curves, and Amy's going behind her, and then Amy stops. And Chloe keeps going. And then Chloe stops. And Amy's backing out of the maze. And Chloe's freaking out. And Amy and Chloe are both freaking out. And they have to stop the exhibit and turn on the lights. And this was part of it. They told us before you go in, hey, if you get freaked out, Amy's got, she gets in tight spaces. And it's a little claustrophobia thing. She could not see reality at that moment. That's what darkness does. It blinds you to reality. In this case, with what John is talking about in his gospel, darkness hides something that is very, very dangerous. Spiritual darkness is a state in which evil is present, wickedness is present, but it's going unnoticed. You don't see what's really there. You can't see what's around you. You can't see what's within you. It's there, but it's not being seen for what it really is, and it's not being named for what it really is. You can't even call it what it is. It's in stealth mode. Evil is under the radar, so to speak. People aren't even able to call evil, even though it's right there in front of them, because there's a blindness, there's a darkness under which the evil hides. So sin can exist, sin can grow in ways that are unobstructive. Sin can thrive like dandelions in potting soil, right? I mean, just growing like crazy, and light exposes the situation. You can see what's real. Things become very clear. Light removes the cloak of darkness, and as a result, things are seen for what they really are. So we enter into this world crawling through a pitch black maze, surrounded by and even infected with sin. And then light arrives, and reality is exposed. And we're kind of called out. So in John's Gospel, light provides the ability to see. Listen to John 12:35. Jesus said to them, "The light is among you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he's going." Why not? Because you can't see. So walk while you have light, because you can see when light comes. You need light in order to walk well. You need light in order to live well. You need an awareness of reality, and that's what life provides. Very similar, that's what light provides. It's very similar to the Old Testament themes that we've already seen, that light provides guidance, light provides truth, light provides what it makes things clear. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path, right? Provides guidance, clarity for me, truth. So in John's Gospel, what is light? Well, among other things, light is that which exposes what is evil, makes it clear, and it exposes what's false. Makes that clear too, which means light shows up, wickedness is unmasked. Light shows up, falseness is made plain. So we're talking here about the arrival of truth, the arrival of righteousness and goodness and purity. So truth shows up, falseness is revealed. Purity shows up, wickedness is revealed. What is good arrives, and what is bad is made plain to see. That's kind of how this is working. The veil of darkness is removed. Now, what I want to point out here is that truth, purity, goodness, righteousness, light is not an abstract concept in the book of John. These are not abstract concepts. In John's Gospel, light is not a concept. It is a person. It is a man. I am the light. I am the light of the world. He doesn't merely tell us true concepts. He does tell us true. Jesus does tell us true concepts, but he doesn't merely tell us true concepts. He is the true concept. He is the truth. He doesn't merely tell us what's pure. He does tell us what's pure, but he doesn't merely tell us what's pure. He doesn't merely tell us what's glorious. In this statement, Jesus is telling us that he is the truth. He is perfect purity. He is true glory. Jesus is the one who in himself brings clarity to all things. I was walking through the woods at the Environmental Learning Center this week over by where we live. I was back there walking the trails, observing the complexities of the nature that surrounded me. There were trees and leaves changing and grasses and birds and bugs and snakes and turkeys and deer and just billions and billions of phenomena all around me. And you know why I could see all of it? Because it was daytime. I wasn't there at night. The light was shining on all of these objects, making them visible for what they really are. That's what light does, and that's what Jesus, the person, does. Jesus is the ultimate, true, perfect, pure, blameless, righteous, loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, life-giving, darkness-conquering reality of the universe, and all things find the truth of their meaning when they are placed in the light of him. Is there something that you think might be true out there? Some statement that was made by Dr. Phil. Some statement that's made by in the Quran or by Muhammad. Some statement something that is put forward by Gandhi. Something that I say. Something that the Pope says. Something that the church said. Is there something out there that you think might be true, or you're wondering whether or not it's true? Well, just put it in the light of Jesus and we'll see. He is the light. He brings the truth of reality into visibility. Is there something out there that you think might be, or you're wondering, is that loving? Is that pure? Is that righteous? Some particular lifestyle or some particular behavior or some particular teaching out there? We'll put it in light of Jesus and we'll find out. Because Jesus is the one who is all things are measured against and by which all things find their true definition. Their true, the reality of what they are is only seen in light of the ultimate reality that sheds light on all things. You see what Jesus is doing here as he claims to be the light of the world. He is claiming to be the one by whom all things are measured and defined by me. He claims to be the standard of what is real and by which all things are to be gauged. He's claiming to be truth. He's claiming to be righteousness. Guys, he's claiming to be God. This is the kind of stuff that got Jesus killed. Right? Like you say stuff like this, people kill you. Especially if you're doing it among the Jews. Who are monotheistic and have a very high view of God. And here comes this guy, and he's essentially saying, I am God. These are the kinds of things that Jesus said. These are the kinds of statements, if you'll just let him speak. Man, I'm so tired of listening to the media talk about Jesus like they know who he is. If you just let him speak for himself, you'll see it's so ridiculous for people to say that they believe that Jesus is a good man or that he is a good teacher, but they don't take these totally radical, extremist statements that he made. They don't take them seriously. You see, you can't read something like this and make him out to be a moderate, open-minded, anything goes, up for whatever, if it makes you happy, inoffensive, harmless, don't rock the boat. All roads lead to God, first century, hippy-dippy spiritual guru. That's not Jesus. That's not this Jesus. C.S. Lewis says it best. I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. I am the light of the world. Mind-blowing. He's either crazy. You've heard Lord, liar, lunatic. He is either crazy or he is evil or he is God. And as we have already seen in the Old Testament, that light is not only the ultimate source of truth, and he's not only the ultimate source of righteousness, but he is our only hope for salvation. The light imagery carries this notion of truth, it carries this notion of purity, and it carries this notion of salvation. Look at this one more time, John 8:12. Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. See, when the light shines, there are two potential responses. We already read about this one response. Everyone who does wicked things hates the light, does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. This is the very natural response of the human being who does wicked things, which means this is all of our natural response. This is the human tendency. Like bugs that scatter back into the darkness when you lift up a rock, when the light comes, the human tendency is going to be to scatter back to the shadows. because the light exposes sin. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes the way that it feels when your sin is exposed, because it reveals guilt. It makes us feel bad about what we've been doing. And some people stay there. They live in the shadows the rest of their life. Even though they've been told, here's what's true, they continue to live in the shadows. It's like finding out from the doctor that you're very, very sick. And instead of coming to terms with the diagnosis and seeking treatment, you wish you'd never gone to the doctor in the first place. You just wish you'd never known about the situation, and then you just are going to now live your life in denial, either of the reality of the sickness or the severity of the illness that you have, and you're going to find ways to justify the belief that you're not really as sick as the doctor said that you were. And you continue to seek the cover of darkness. You continue to live in darkness despite the reality of who Jesus is and what Jesus has said about your life. I'm going to continue to live in the shadows. I'm probably not as bad as he says that I am. My problem's probably not as bad as he says that it is. That's how many people respond to the light of Christ, and there they live until their death. That's one response to light, is run for the shadows. There are others who've been living in darkness, and just like the rest, the darkness has been hiding something, a spiritual illness, a spiritual cancer within us called sin, and it's been thriving. And then these people, they get the news from the doctor. The light shines and exposes the reality. You get the diagnosis. And they realize the reality of the situation, and the news hurts them too, actually. When the light shines and exposes the reality of your sickness called sin, it hurts, right? The reality of the fact that we are not well. And we feel bad because this is a cancer that we are guilty of contributing to. I mean, we've actually been feeding this thing. It's flourishing in our lives because all our lives we've just been feeding it. Under the cloak of darkness, we've just been feeding sin. And the light exposes us. We're sick and we're guilty. But by the grace of God, and it really is only ever by the grace of God, this other group of people accept the situation. And they say, they come to terms with it. I have a problem. I've got a very, very bad problem. Only by the grace of God does that ever happen. I have a problem. And I do not want to die. I don't want to. And by the grace of God, rather than their natural tendency to run for the shadows, they actually believe that the doctor can heal them. And so they follow him. They believe him and they follow him. They trust him. They take his prescription. And they don't continue to walk in darkness. They don't continue to hide and nurture the illness. They don't continue to live as though the life of darkness is the good life. The life of darkness is not the good life. It's the blind life. It's the dead life. That's not where we want to live. If you want to live, then respond to the light. Follow the light. Follow Jesus. Follow Jesus and live. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life, or the light that provides life. Nobody lives unless they respond to the light. Nobody lives unless they respond to the light. If you're going to live your life in the shadows, you will not live. You have to believe and follow the light. When Jesus shines on us and he tells us the reality of who he is as our God, and he shows us the reality of who we are as sinners who've been living in darkness, we have to choose whether or not we're going to return to the darkness where we will die in our sins, or whether we are going to let the light expose us for who we are and provide us with life. Because this light not only has the power to reveal what's hidden beneath the darkness, but somehow this light has the power to heal what's been hidden beneath the darkness. The light shines and a healing takes place. When we live in the light of Christ and we are open to His evaluation and we are receptive to His reality, we are trusting in His caring grace for sinners, submissive to His instruction, willing to follow, and then we live in the light. Jesus rescues us. Jesus saves us. Living in light. Letting Him be the one who reveals what is true and agreeing with Him about His assessment and living in light of that. This is the way to life. Living in the light transforms us then into people of light. And that becomes a new reality for disciples of Jesus. True Christians are people who live in this constant exposure to the light. And that light is changing them into light-bearing people. It's the supernatural, spiritual phenomenon whereby the one to whom we are looking is actually pouring His light upon us, infusing it into us so that it changes and transforms the way that we are. We all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. You start looking more and more and more and more like the light that you're looking upon. You behold and you become what you're beholding. You become like Him. Light is increasingly emanating from our lives, not because we're the ultimate source. We are not the sun in the solar system. We are the moon. And the light of the sun is reflecting off of us, increasingly being absorbed into us, reflecting off of us, His light reflecting off of us as we live in His light. You're a disco ball, right? Jesus, Jesus shining off you all directions. If you're living in the light. Are you living in the light? Are you living in the light? This is what we're made for. We are made to live in the light of His infinite glory and to take Him in. Lord, show us your light. Show us who you are. Show us your purity. Show us what is true. We want to live in light of you, Lord. Expose us. Don't let me live in darkness. Don't let me live with sin, unexposed, killing me. Don't let it happen. I want to live in the light. I want to live in the light because I want to be changed. I want to shine. I want to be a disco ball, man. And let's follow the light. Live in it, follow Him. Listen to Paul talk about this. I'll close with this. Ephesians 5. At one time you were darkness. Paul takes it a step further. He doesn't just say you were in darkness. He's like, you were darkness. Your whole life was wrapped up in this sin-covering reality. Sin and hiding it, and darkness and blindness. That's you. At one time, Christian, you were darkness. But now, you are light in the Lord. Right? You're emanating now. Walk as children of light. Live like it. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. You live in light of the one who is good and right and true, and you will bear fruit of goodness and rightness and truth. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Call reality what it is. You be light. You tell the truth about what is real in the world. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret, but when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. Right? Light comes, things are seen for what they are. Expose it. Anything that is exposed by the light becomes visible. And then check this out. For anything that becomes visible is light. Check that out. Here's what Paul's saying. You have been transformed by light. Live as light. Spread that light. Shine onto things so that they become visible. And they too will become light-bearing. God will transform people through your life as the light of Christ shines through your life, so that they too will become light bearers. They will become another moon in the solar system to the glory of God. So let's keep bearing the fruit of light. Keep bearing the fruit of light, and you will. You will if you're living in the light. If you live in the light, you will bear the fruit. And let's keep making all things visible for what they really are as we reflect through our lives and the words that come from our mouths, the light of the world, Jesus Christ, knowing that He will continue His work of rescue and transformation both in us and through us as we set our eyes on Him. Let's pray.